Hello and welcome back to the Make It Your Business podcast. Today I've got myself, James Murray, and Duncan Casey. I say today, it's always us, although we've not done any in a while, and also we're in a bit more of a relaxed setting. We're just sitting on the sofa.
Yeah.
So we thought today we'll have a little chat about AI and how it's affecting the movie industry, and obviously Duncan's well versed with that, so I thought I'd challenge you on a few topics and obviously talk about, generally it's going to be quite quick, I would have thought, because imagine AI's been fantastic and only brought out positive outcomes.
Definitely. Well, I suppose we should also preface this by saying this kind of stemmed from, James sent me a clip from that Joe Rogan podcast episode with Matt Damon and Ben Affleck talking about The Rip, which my friend Scott Atkins is in, actually. Shout out to Scott. But that, they were talking a lot about algorithmic filmmaking, and then they got onto AI.
And Matthew McConaughey's been talking about it with how that's going to affect their industry. I've seen something from Ben Affleck as well. So it's obviously a topic that's being discussed quite a lot within the film world.
The general sort of, or the main topic or area that is being debated in Hollywood seems more around copyright, and again, because they're quite unionized and because they're quite a litigious, legally aware society more than we are. There's a lot of discussion about use of likeness, use of voice, that kind of thing, which obviously A-listers are going to get the mic most of the time to talk about it, and their primary concern is going to be that, whereas the rest of us who sort of, jobbing actors and whatnot, who make up 98% of the rest of the industry, are far less concerned with like insuring their ears or whatever, other silly things go, like who was it had their legs insured? Was it Julia Roberts? Whoever it was. Anyway, someone had their legs insured. And I think, so conversations like that, yes, are important and obviously have wider implications going forward. But the main source of frustration for me tends to come from people, especially on LinkedIn, who will post generated video and say Hollywood is dead. That's what they'll always say. Hollywood is dead. The future is this. I made this in my bedroom in 5 minutes and it's a sort of really, there might be photorealistic imagery in it, but it's completely devoid of, there's no humanity in it at all. And I think...
Are you talking about there's no humanity in it within, as far as from a visual perspective, or a depth within the narrative and the story?
Let's go back. Okay, so firstly, making a 30-second or 3-minute or 5-minute... not to derail, my friend Martin sent me a video. It was about 4 or 5 minutes long, where someone had created a sort of James Bond set piece with Daniel Craig, who wasn't, but an AI Daniel Craig on a Vespa driving through India, like having a sort of Vespa chase, and it cuts between that and a conversation between two baddies about a pen drive or something, and it's means the dialogue doesn't mean anything, nothing means anything at all. You can see movements and stuff from him are clearly taken from films, so it scoured the films and just copied his movements from certain things. And and the driving narrative behind this stuff is always, this is look, it can just do the film, so why would we need Hollywood? And you go, you fundamentally misunderstand what drives people to watch movies.
Well, it's the difference between novelty and quality, I think.
Well, it's not. No, what it is, and this is. I have yet, and I say this to everyone, I've yet to have this question answered by any AI evangelist ever. I've not had an answer, let alone a satisfactory one, when I say to them, how does this improve the experience for the audience? How does this improve the movie-going audience experience? They can never answer, because all they'll come back with is like, wow, this cuts out the cost of production and all this sort of stuff. And you go, right, but how does that improve the audience experience?
I would say potentially, I'm thinking of a TV series, Game of Thrones.
Right.
One of the restrictions within Game of Thrones was the fact that it took so long to produce each series, and every time they did another series, the actors had other jobs to go to, and it was going on so long that they almost ended up sort of rushing the ending, and sort of destroyed what was a relatively, a really good show, and ended up sort of really plateauing at the end. Now, if there was a technology where production could have been speeded up, I'm not talking here about replacing actors. I'm talking about as far as the visual effects are concerned. Would that have been a positive outcome?
Let's take generative video and let's take production workflows, because this is how I separate the two. And what a lot of people seem to want to do is conflate everything into AI video, go away Hollywood, we're the future. And it's like self-proclaimed AI filmmakers will wax lyrical about that, but and in an almost sort of incantive way, they think if I just say this enough, it will be true.
Yeah. But the same goes for saying it enough that it won't affect, that it won't be true, and that could be considered sticking your head. Here's why AI can't replace
film, TV, narrative, dramatized film. The reason why people watch podcasts, watch TV, watch anything is to experience the human condition, to find some association. So, and we'll get onto this topic later, because we're going to talk about on a separate episode. We're going to talk about storytelling in film and allegory and subtext, anyway, and how that helps with your marketing. Anyway, but the reason they do it is because they want to find a connection to the human condition. Sci-fi, for example, and horror and fantasy. Game of Thrones, right? Game of Thrones is a heightened. It's not real. It's fantasy, but it allows you to examine the human condition because it's a fantastical prism. In other words, once you're saying to an audience, look, we're beyond the bounds of reality, it enables you to look at the human condition under a very, like Star Trek did it, and Star Wars does it, and
it's still character led.
RoboCop, for example, is not about a robot man in a cop. My dad hates that film, right? Because he goes, it's so ridiculous, but he loves the Terminator. We'll get on to that. But the point is, that's not a film about that. It's about what is a human soul. What is, you find a human connection with him by the end, AI can never empathize with what it is to be a human. It doesn't know that. All it can do is guess based on scouring the internet. It'll never be able to empathize with the human condition. And this is why I say it will never be able to produce on its own engaging narrative film or anything like that. And look, just saying, okay, because there's a 4-minute clip of Daniel Craig riding a Vespa through Mumbai does not mean that would make an entire movie. It's not that fundamentally misunderstands what makes a movie compelling.
Mimicking it.
It's mimicking, yeah.
But obviously we're not talking there about 100% solely handing over the rights to Game of Thrones to an AI model.
No. And so to your point about what would essentially be, curtailing workflows. I mean, I've said this, and I said this years ago when this started out. I said I wouldn't want to be in online editing or 3D modeling, rendering, that kind of work anymore, because look, I think you're still going to need a human input with it and all that kind of thing. Yeah. But I do think, like rendering backgrounds or creating mats for things, I just think it's not gonna. But with virtual studios as well, that like they shot The Mandalorian on, and and these things where basically you've got huge wraparound LED screens that can project. If you can then say, okay, my background plate, I'm on the moon and there's an explosion over there, and you can do that in real time effectively, because this is what takes so long, is people have to sort of render those backgrounds. They have to kind of create them,
fly out to New Zealand, and and sometimes they'll shoot background plates and then composite things into them and all that stuff. Don't get me wrong though, there's an element of artistry in that I think you don't want to just throw out. 100%.
You can't abdicate all of that to AI, but I think AI will find its place in. It will simply be probably a much more expedient CGI, really, at the end of the day. And definitely in terms of, from my world of sort of indie filmmaking, being able to put together pitch decks and what's the word? synopsis or that sort of stuff it's hugely advantageous. It's a massive, being able to go, okay, we've been working on it. I'm working on a horror series at the moment that we're trying to pitch, and coming up with an antagonist, it's much easier for us to be able to go, we have a meeting, we go, look, I think he should look like this or have these attributes or that, blah, blah, blah. And then you go and you get AI to give you mock-ups to sort of play around. It's so much more efficient and it democratizes the film. And that's where I would say it will have a tremendously good impact. I think, it will allow people without much budget to compete in the marketplace. But the problem at the moment is there's this huge stumbling point. And I just think it's an industry that doesn't know which side of the fence to come down on. And there's this misconception out there that it will simply lay waste to all film, production.
Well, I always think with a lot of these type of things, any sort of new technology or any sort of change, it's a bit of a pendulum. So I think sometimes we're still maybe, and I use the word novelty. I think we're still in that phase. You talked about LinkedIn, and all of a sudden, there'd be like an AI generated. I think the latest one I've seen is people in their office with the face, and then it has all the things around them, and it's just an AI generated image. Then somebody's punched in and said, what would I look like as a caricature?
Yeah.
And the first one of those you see, you're like, oh, that's quite cool. And then you see a few more, and then it dies off really quickly. And I think the same sort of thing would happen with in this, where, that James Bond video, you look at it and you go, oh, that's quite cool how they can do that. And okay, you're going to have an opinion, but from somebody that's not in that world, they might think that's quite exciting, impressive.
It's very impressive.
But it doesn't have any underlying substance. And that's where it won't. And then I think people will then fall back to quality. Whereas, as I said, quality over novelty. Because I just think that at the moment it's more, wow, look what we can do.
Yeah.
But actually what that can be used for in real terms, I think is a bit more limited. And as you say, you've got your story, especially obviously it's a separate subject, but Game of Thrones, underlying all of that are some fantastic books written over 20 years. The imaginations of an author that has put everything into that, human experience, historical and things all combined. You couldn't reimagine that. Now, AI in the future, somebody that's not read those books, it will probably pick apart things from that, something from Star Trek, somewhere from Star Wars, and produce a very good storyline based on a 5-part piece and be able to kind of put those things in. But eventually, and that might be quite impressive at first, but I think over time.
But I think what it will miss is the dialogue with the audience, because something like I have watched the first season of Game of Thrones. It wasn't my thing. I'm not a fantasy guy. I've done fantasy films, not really into them, but something like that. When an author sits down and writes, usually in fantasy or sci-fi or that kind of stuff, they want to talk about something. George Orwell, for example, wanted to talk about the overreach of authoritarianism, that kind of stuff. And so you imagine a future or an alternate universe where something's happened, or, and I guess with Game of Thrones, it's like, well, this is a world where dragons exist and it's sort of medieval, whatever. But what I really want to talk about is family politics or incest or whatever it is. I don't really know, but that, right. Okay. So fine. And that's his stage on which he sets this, and because of the setting, he's able then to talk about these things that would be much harder if it was in modern day suburbia somewhere. So fine, but that dialogue with the audience about like saying, okay, this is the premise, this is the setup, and I'm inviting you in as an audience member to have opinions on these things and follow different stuff. That AI is never going to do that, because even though it could look at something like Game of Thrones, analyze the whole thing in 5 seconds flat and go, right, oh, this bit's a good bit and that bit's a good bit. It will never go, how would I feel in this moment? How is an audience supposed to feel when they see?
Okay, challenge you on that then.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of the Marvel films.
No.
Over CGI'd fluff and nonsense that does extremely well in the box office.
Well, it's not now.
Okay. What point did it stop? But again, I would say, how much of a deep storyline is that? Is it maybe that's not a good comparison because that's a franchise and there's another, there's a almost like a supporting a football team or something. There's an underlying group of people that just will watch whatever comes out because they're looking for the Easter eggs within it and those other little hidden things, rather than the quality of the underlying story that's going with it.
Well, that's, I mean, look, there's always going to be bad movies. That's not, I'm not suggesting that, humans won't make bad movies. They will, they do, but then there's still something compelling about them. Some of the most successful films in the world were pants if you objectively look at them, but there's something human in that too, and there's something compelling for someone. I think Marvel, the derailment of Marvel has been much more because I think they ran out of things to say, and by their own admission, Black Widow was an example of this, where it was a bunch of prevised. A lot of the action set pieces are prevised ahead of time, and in the case of Black Widow, they said that I think that bridge is the bridge set piece or something that had been done, and they literally will make these action set pieces. They'll previs them years in advance, and then find a film to put them in. And when you're making movies like that, like cinematic Lego, you're going to run out of road. It's very hard to then sort of stitch it together, and those things are sort of algorithmic. I would my pitch to, because these films we want to make, we want to make a cinema exclusive for 12 months, because I see it as going forward, what we're going to have is shifting from genre. We're going to have medium specific entertainment. So I really see, the Ben Affleck, Matt Damon thing, talking about Netflix production style, to people dual screening or whatever, and needing to have beats and repetition of plot points and all that stuff for people who are on their phones and being distracted.
Yeah.
I think what you're going to start to see is HETV and streaming films will be that eventually. You'll have AI, AI will become the slop generator. It will simply be the thing that you sit down and go, make a thing of a dog farting on the moon, whatever, whatever nonsense you want to put out.
Because also you got to remember, people are sleepwalking. I mean, we like a bit of detail. I like and I like as much detail as possible. I like the hidden stories. I like following along with the protagonist, and I will pick apart TV series and movies, and there is a lot of slop out there that gets highly regarded, but from people, but not because it's necessarily any good, but because it just keeps them entertained. And a lot of the time in life, people are just sleepwalking through. They'd sort of get home, turn on the TV, look at their phones, have the food. They're not really watching or engaged, or they're talking, or they're doing something else. And it's almost like just an addiction to have something else on in the background. So I think, if you're Netflix and you're looking to reduce costs and you just need to produce a certain amount of quantity of product, then you're going to turn to this. Yeah.
Well, I think, like I say, I think it will be divided up by the medium you're consuming it in. And I do think, AI will, I think ultimately when the dust settles, it will be a curio that it's just a toy. You can play with it. And as far as video is concerned, obviously the implication in other areas of business is totally different. And I'm not, not really talking about that. I'm talking about, how it will work as far as entertainment is concerned. And then you've got things like vertical dramas. That's an $8 billion industry at the moment. I've done one. That'll be on your phone. That's another medium. And then so that's why I'm trying to pitch a movie that's really a cinema movie, because that will become a different thing. It used to be obviously films would be in the cinema, then they come to your home suites. That you've got to think now in terms of the type of audience you're dealing with. If someone goes to the cinema, they're a captive audience. They're not going to be on their phone, or they're unlikely to be on their phone throughout. They wanted to come here. They paid money to come to the cinema and have that collective experience. Well, you're going to have to start making movies for that again, and so
it's the experience. It goes back to
the medium in which you're consuming it. And I just think that's going to be the divide now. And I don't see a problem with that. I think fine, compete on those platforms. That's kind of how we've got to see it, I think. And I just hope that cinemas get on board with that and go, do you know what? We could have our own IPs and take much more control over this. I know this is not really talking about AI, but well, it is in a way, because I think actually again, it comes back to this thing about democratizing it. If cinemas are smart, they will, and some of them have got their own distribution arms, although they're not using them as much as they should be. But if they're smart, they will go, right, we will allow submissions. We will look at funding models for different things. We will essentially use it like a negative pickup deal. So in other words, we will say we will distribute it if you can then go and raise the funds. So like a letter of intent or whatever. There's all sorts of tax breaks to sort of make that work with 50% of the budget. So, you go out, you get that, you make your movie, it gets distributed, and we've even come up with like a turnkey marketing strategy for ours. Like we've woven that into how we want to produce it. We want to do lots of like local guerrilla marketing and that kind of stuff on a very meager budget. I've got a PR firm who are willing to come in and work with us. So, really sort of making little IPs for that medium specifically. And, it may go to streaming after a year to help support the next film. That's
I mean, if you've got a movie that's really doing well and highly regarded, more people are going to go out and see it, especially if they know for 12 months they definitely aren't going to see it anywhere else.
Yeah.
And then actually for anybody else that does want to see it afterwards, there should still be a retained value in that to then sell it to the next whatever streaming service.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think it's a call to, I think in going forward, like philosophically, when, the industries, as far as that I'm looking at and working with businesses when they come to me and I'm speaking to them about raising debt, there's obviously quite volatile industries. And sometimes that has been the leisure industry. There are particular sectors that are harder to finance because they're seen as high risk. But I think as we go forward, if you've got any sort of experience type business, if it's done well, that's I think where people are going to go to. I think that's experiences are the one thing that we will crave as humans forever.
Yeah.
And the cinema is kind of a long-standing traditional one. Going out for a meal, going to the cinema, it's a nice experience, and having another reason to go.
Well, I think that's it. I think, a lot of what's killed it off recently is that people want it to still be there, but they don't want to go because they know that whatever they're going to go and see is going to end up on streaming in a month or something. So they may as well, quite often there's been films I've intended to go and see, haven't been able to, and then suddenly they're on Disney or whatever. And I go, well, all right.
Yeah, because it's too quick.
Yeah.
I wonder if people are going to the cinema and struggling to not get their phone out these days. Because they're so used to. I haven't noticed it.
Yeah. But I don't go in peak times. I go at
but I'm just thinking because I've got in the habit myself in sitting on the sofa and watching TV, and then I sort of pick my phone up and I'm like, what am I looking at? Like, why am I picking this thing up? And I have now got to the point where sometimes I move it away because it's just become a habit.
Yeah.
But it's weird when I go to cinema, I don't ever think to pick up my phone. So I don't know, because the environment's changed, your habits change.
Well, and because you've paid to watch that film, you paid good money to go there. You've made the effort of getting in your car, going to the cinema. It's an investment of time and money to go and watch a movie. And I think that, that needs to be rethought because at the moment it's just people reselling other people's IP and licensing things, and that's not working anymore.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's not what we were supposed to be talking about. But I do think AI in filmmaking has the potential to be a really positive thing, but not to the degree that a lot of people seem to want to sell it as, which is a complete replacement for all film production. And if you challenged any of these people on that, they would of course say no. But then that is what they're proposing with, they also do think that there's a place for an entirely AI generated film, and I don't see it.
Shall we lead on the next episode then? Shall we wrap this one up for now on here? And then
I think so.
We'll follow this up with talking about how, because we've not talked much business here, but
no, sorry.
As a follow, as a prequel to talking about business media and your content, we could kind of go into that and how and where AI could be advantageous in yours and where it lacks.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah. Happy with that?
Definitely.
All right. Well, thank you for watching, and we will see you very shortly on the next one.